Today, we are strapping on our figurative skis and heading straight down maybe the steepest, fastest slope in sports history. We're talking about the life and the legacy of Jean-Claude Killy.
And this really is a deep dive because his career, it didn't just peak at the Olympics. His career became the blueprint for the modern sports celebrity.
Exactly. We're not just talking about some great skier who, retired young. We're talking about a man who basically defined what a global sports icon could achieve after crossing the finish line.
He leveraged that speed, that flair into, well, commercial and even political power. It's an incredible story.
Okay, so let's unpack this for everyone. Jean-Claude Killy, the French Alpine skier he dominated the late 1960s. And this was a crucial period, right? The sport itself is changing.
Massively. It was shifting from this, primarily amateur thing into a huge commercial opportunity.
So our mission today is to take a chronological journey. We're going to start with his, frankly, tumultuous childhood in the French Alps. Then we'll move through this really reckless, often frustrating early period. He was marked by illness and injury all the way up to achieving that legendary Triple Crown at the 1968 Grenoble Olympics.
And that's really only half the story, isn't it? Because after that, we have to meticulously track how he took that fame. And with the help of some pretty revolutionary management, converted it into a decades-long career.
Right. As a high-octane global celebrity, he was racing cars, starring in movies.
And then ultimately transforming himself into one of the most powerful and frankly, effective high-level sports administrators in the world. He played the long game after winning the short race.
That initial snapshot of his achievements, it's just breathtaking on its own. 3 Alpine events at the 68 Winter Olympics downhill, giant slalom and slalom. He was the most successful athlete at those games.
And crucially, before that, he'd won the first 2 overall World Cup title in 1967 and 1968.
And you have to remember, the World Cup was brand new.
Exactly. He wasn't just dominating. He was setting the standard for what World Cup dominance even looked like. And then, the ultimate move, he retires from the World Cup at the absurdly young age of 24, at the absolute zenith of his powers.
And in those 2 seasons, just 2 seasons, he racks up 18 total World Cup victories, 6 downhill, 7 giant slalom, and 5 slalom. That's a full career for most ski champions, and Killy just compressed it into this 2-year flash of brilliance.
But to understand the speed of that success, you really have to look at the incredibly volatile and challenging foundation he came from.
That's it. The speed and the volatility, they were intertwined in his personality right from the very start.
Absolutely.
So let's go way back. We're starting this deep dive in Saint-Cloud, a suburb of Paris. Killy was born there in 1943, right in the middle of the German occupation of France in World War II.
But he didn't spend his formative years near the capital. The defining move came right after the war. The family relocated to Val d'Isère in the Alps in 1945.
And his father, Robert, he seems like a crucial figure here, a former Spitfire pilot for the Free French during the war.
Right. And you can imagine he brought that kind of rigid discipline, but also that adventurous spirit to this small Savoie village.
Robert Killy first opened a ski shop in Val d'Isère, capitalizing on the post-war boom in Alpine tourism, and then later he ran a hotel.
So this environment, the mountains, the snow, the sort of entrepreneurial energy, it just became the defining feature of Jean-Claude's entire existence.
But the family history is marked by some pretty serious early trauma. When Jean-Claude was only 7 in 1950, his mother, Madeleine, she abandoned the family for another man.
And this left Robert, the former fighter pilot, to single-handedly raise 3 children. Jean-Claude, his older sister France, and his infant brother Mike. For a child, that's a massive emotional upheaval.
And that disruption had an immediate and, a profound impact on his education and his entire trajectory. Killy was sent to boarding school in Chambéry, about 80 miles down the valley.
And he absolutely hated it. The sources are so clear on this. He despised being shut up in a classroom. He found the structure just confining, dull, especially compared to the freedom of the mountains.
And you see this theme, this resistance to traditional authority. It's a key insight into his personality.
It absolutely is. And that deep aversion to structured education is what pushed him so aggressively into skiing. It became his whole focus. It was his escape hatch.
And his father, eventually, he just made a pragmatic decision, and he allowed him to drop out of school entirely at 15.
A bet that paid off incredibly fast. Within a year, at 16, he's on the French national junior team.
But that early career phase was far from polished, right? He wasn't a professional.
Oh, not at all. He had a reputation for being blisteringly fast, Unquestionably talented, but also extremely volatile and physically reckless.
He was the guy everyone knew could win, but they also kind of expected him to crash out.
Mm.
The sources repeatedly say he did not usually complete his races.
He was all speed and just minimal control. He had to learn to temper that raw velocity.
And yet, even with that volatility, the talent was. You couldn't deny it. In December 1961, at just 18 years old, he gets his first international win, a giant slalom, and it's right there in his home village of Val d'Isère.
And what a way to do it. He started from the 39th position. Now, for anyone who doesn't ski a race, you should know the snow conditions degrade rapidly. Starting that far back, especially in a giant slalom, is a massive disadvantage.
So to win from there, it just showed the sheer physical power and the speed he could generate when he actually managed to keep his skis underneath him.
Yeah. And that combination of raw talent and reckless ambition, it's perfectly captured in the story from the 1962 season. He was trying to qualify for the downhill in Cortina d'Ampezzo ahead of the World Championships in Chamonix.
And his reckless style just completely caught up with him. It created a disaster that could ended his career right there.
He was about 200 yards from the finish, posting an exceptionally fast time. When he hits a patch of severe ice, he goes down hard. But instead of stopping, he immediately gets up and crosses the finish line on one ski.
On one ski. He was determined to get a time no matter what it cost him.
And he got the fastest time of the day. But at the finish, the full damage was clear. His other leg was broken.
It's a phenomenal display of guts and speed, but the immediate result was a catastrophe for his career. He missed the entire 1962 World Championships, watching the event from just 50 miles away in Chamonix on crutches.
That early pattern of high risk, high reward, and devastating setbacks is so crucial to understanding the man.
And the setbacks just kept coming. Then came the '64 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck. He was 20. His coach had entered him in all three events, really to prepare him for the '68 games in France. But Killy arrives, and he is in extremely poor health.
Yeah, this was a physical crisis that started 2 years earlier. He was plagued by these recurrences of amoebic dysentery and hepatitis.
Where did he get that?
He contracted them back in '62 during his mandatory service with the French army in Algeria. So imagine trying to perform in an explosive sport while suffering from a debilitating chronic illness. His form was it was completely off.
And the results were just heartbreaking for someone who was already being called a heavy favorite. He falls just a few yards after the downhill start. He loses a binding in the slalom. And in the giant slalom, he manages to finish, but he only places fifth. The sources paint this picture of total Olympic disappointment.
Yeah, lost potential. So you have the reckless dropout, the broken leg, the physical breakdown at his first Olympics. Why didn't he just fade away?
That's the question.
And here's where you see that mental toughness. Despite the '64 Olympic disaster, just weeks later, he completely dominates a giant slalom at Garmisch-Partenkirchen. And that race counted toward the prestigious Arlberg-Kandahar events.
Which, for those who might not know, the Arlberg-Kandahar events are arguably the oldest, most prestigious classics in the sport. They date back to 1928. So to win one of those right after a major Olympic failure, it signaled that his talent was still there.
And it wasn't a fluke. He goes on to win the Hahnenkamm slalom in Kitzbühel 3 times in a row, all the way up to 1967.
And Kitzbühel is one of the most feared courses on the circuit.
Exactly. This run of consistent wins showed that the reckless youth was slowly, painfully evolving into a consistent technical winner in the biggest races.
So this is the turning point. The mid-60s, he's overcoming the health issues, managing his volatility, and he's improving his technical skiing.
His colleagues at the time gave him the nickname Tutoon. It's a bit of a playful, goofy name. But underneath that, he was honing himself into one of the most disciplined and effective technical racers on the planet.
And that improved form paid off on the global stage in August '66, right before the World Cup launched. At the World Championships in Portillo, Chile, Killy scores his first major win against an elite international field. He takes gold in the downhill.
A discipline that rewards consistency and controlled aggression. He also got the gold in the combined event, so he was in peak condition, physically and mentally. He had finally mastered that balance between speed and control.
And the timing. We keep saying it, but the timing couldn't have been better. As Killy is peaking, the first official World Cup season is being launched in January 1967. The stage was just perfectly set for 2 years of absolute unprecedented dominance.
Right. That takes us to that flashpoint, the period of just sheer overwhelming dominance, 67 and 68. This is the 2-year window where he transforms from a very good French racer into a global sports phenomenon, a national hero.
The 1967 season, that was the inaugural World Cup season, and Killy immediately becomes its face, its first champion.
And his dominance that first year, it wasn't just about accumulating points. It was about crushing the competition across every single discipline, which was incredibly rare. The season had 17 races, and Killy won 12 of them.
12 of 17. That level of efficiency is just staggering.
He swept the board, he took the overall title easily, and remarkably, he won the season standings in all 3 classic disciplines: downhill, giant slalom, and slalom. That's a true trifecta.
If you look at the data from 67, it's even more impressive. There were 5 scheduled downhill races that season. He won all 5.
A perfect season in the most dangerous discipline. He also won 4 out of 5 giant slalom races.
So this total domination in 67 meant he was the undisputed king heading into 1968 with the Olympics on his home soil in France. The pressure must have been unimaginable.
Which takes us straight to the 1968 Winter Olympics in Grenoble. This was the moment the entire country, the French press, and this new global TV audience had been waiting for. And he delivered, achieving the legendary Triple Crown.
The Triple Crown. That's all 3 Olympic Alpine golds: downhill, giant slalom, and slalom. He was the story of the Games.
And a fascinating technical detail, because the Olympics doubled as the World Championships back then, his combined results also secured him the World Championship title in the combined event.
The sources call that a paper race. Can you explain what that means for our listeners?
Sure. In those days, the combined title wasn't a separate dedicated race. It was calculated by compiling the times or points from the 3 individual Olympic events. Since Killy won all 3, he automatically won the combined title on paper. It just solidified his status as the best all-around skier in the world.
The 68 Games are remembered not just for the wins, but for the technology and the controversy, especially in the downhill. The margins were razor thin.
That's right. The TET heightened the drama. These were the first games to use electrical timing by Omega, accurate to 1/100th of a second. Before that, it was often hand timing, rounded to the 10th. Suddenly, every tiny physical margin counted. Absolutely.
And the sources detail this specific move Killy exploited at the start gate. It was arguably brilliant, arguably controversial. He used his upper body strength to hit the start bar while his body was already moving forward.
So he's essentially starting the clock a fraction of a second after he's already begun his descent. It was a subtle maneuver designed to give him just a few hundredths of a second edge. Killy was known for being technically innovative, and here he was innovating the start.
And those few hundredths, they proved absolutely critical in the downhill. He beat his teammate, Guy Paralot, by that incredibly slim margin.
And when the difference between gold and silver is measured in milliseconds, and the winner is using a physical trick against the new timing system, it just underscores his competitive ruthlessness.
Absolutely. And that slight edge sealed the first of his 3 goals. It gave him the psychological momentum to complete the sweep.
The Olympics were also folded directly into the World Cup standings that year, which was a unique inclusion. So because of those 3 gold medals, Killy easily defended his overall World Cup title, his 2nd consecutive globe.
He was human, though. While he won the overall in the giant slalom standings, he finished 2nd in the downhill and slalom that year.
Correct. But the Olympic points were more than enough to guarantee the overall victory.
And then the ultimate mic drop. He retires from the World Cup circuit immediately after the 1968 season. At age 24, he just stepped away at the absolute zenith of his career. An unprecedented move.
That retirement at that age, it's the signal that he had a bigger plan. He wasn't just retiring from competition. He was retiring from amateur-era competition to become Killy, the global celebrity. He was launching the next phase of his life.
Which takes us to this truly unique chapter, Killy, the global celebrity. This is where he becomes a walking, talking commercial brand.
And the timing, again, was everything. His success in Grenoble coincided perfectly with the 68 Games being the first to be extensively televised in color by ABC.
That's the key. Color television turned him from a European sports star into an overnight celebrity in the United States. He had the Gallic flair, the rugged looks, the narrative of total victory. It made him a massive commodity, especially in the U.S. market.
And the business world moved instantly. Within months of his Triple Crown, in May of 68, he signs with International Management Group, IMG, the revolutionary firm headed by Mark McCormack.
And for anyone who doesn't recognize the significance of IMG at that time, McCormack basically invented modern sports marketing. He realized athletes weren't just competitors, they were endorsable properties. What was his strategy with Killy?
McCormack realized Killy transcended skiing. He wasn't just selling equipment, he was selling lifestyle, speed, success. Killy was one of IMG's earliest and biggest successes outside of golf, where McCormack had started with Arnold Palmer.
And the Killy brand just exploded. He signed a huge deal with Head Ski in the fall of '68 to endorse the metal and fiberglass Killy 800 ski,
Yeah.
a direct product with his name on it.
And his endorsement portfolio was so diverse, it spanned luxury and mass market appeal, which was revolutionary for an athlete. He promoted the American Express card, signaling prestige and global travel.
But then he balanced that with mass market products. He was a spokesman for Schwinn Bicycles, United Airlines, and famously Chevrolet.
And that's where his celebrity status crossed into pop culture commentary. The journalist Hunter S. Thompson dedicated a 1970 article to Killy's role as a Chevrolet spokesman.
The Temptations of Jean-Claude Killy. When one of the era's sharpest cultural commentators is writing about your endorsement deals, you have definitely crossed over into the celebrity zeitgeist.
Oh, absolutely. And for a generation of American kids watching TV in the early 70s, Killy was instantly recognizable, partly because of this TV commercial anecdote. His French accent was so thick that when he introduced himself, American children often misheard his name as Chocolate Kitty.
It's a marvelous piece of accidental branding.
Yeah.
Did that undermine him, or did it make him even more accessible?
It made it accessible and memorable. It took him from a distant European hero to this instantly recognizable, if slightly comical, figure in American pop culture. That kind of widespread recognition is the definition of a successful brand crossover.
And speaking of branding, he was backed by the champagne company Moet and Chandon, who had a very specific demand.
Yeah, they paid him specifically to be seen with a bottle of their champagne on his table everywhere he went. It's classic lifestyle marketing, using a celebrity's presence in glamorous resorts to sell luxury and aspiration.
And this high-stakes sponsorship led to one of the most incredible stunts of his post-skiing career.
The 1974 extreme skiing venture. As part of that champagne deal, Killy was paid to ski down the previously unskied eastern slope of Mount Ngauruhoe in New Zealand, an active volcano.
Which our listeners will know as Peter Jackson's Mount Doom from Lord of the Rings. This was a stunt with genuine life-threatening risk.
He had to descend this rugged slope, and radar recorded his speed at over 100 miles per hour. That's 160 kilometers per hour. He actually had to do it in 2 takes because clouds spoiled the visibility for the cameras on the first run.
Imagine that, being paid by a champagne company to perform a near-death stunt on a volcano. That is peak 1970s celebrity marketing.
And the fame went beyond stunts. He leveraged it into acting. He starred as a ski instructor in a 1972 crime movie called Snow Job.
And he didn't just do crime dramas. He played himself in a 1983 comedy, Copper Mountain, which starred a young Jim Carrey. He also had 2 of his own TV series.
Those were key to sustaining the Killy brand in the U.S. The Killy style showcased resorts, and the Killy Challenge had him racing celebrities with handicaps. He was constantly curating his image as the ultimate sportsman.
Now let's talk about his brief but intense foray into motor racing, which actually happened during his peak skiing years.
Yes, between 1967 and 1970. And this wasn't a hobby, it was a serious competitive outlet. In the 1967 Targa Florio, a legendary road race in Sicily, he teamed up with Bernard Cahier.
And they finished 7th overall, which is exceptional, and they were first in the GT class driving a Porsche 911S. It shows that speed and technical precision translated seamlessly from the slopes to the track.
And he entered the most famous endurance race in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1969. He partnered with Bob Wollek, another skier-turned driver. They led their class for a huge portion of the race before a mechanical issue forced them out with only 4 hours left.
Even after retiring from the World Cup, the competitive pull of ski racing was too strong. He made a brief but impactful comeback on the U.S. pro circuit.
Right. In November 72, at 29, he comes out of retirement. This was the era of cash purses and head-to-head racing, a totally different environment.
And the comeback was fueled by a direct challenge from the 2-time defending pro champion, Spider Sabich. Killy came in, and after a spirited contest, he won the 1973 season title, dethroning Sabich.
And the money reflected that. He took over $28,000 in winnings, plus a $40,000 bonus. He proved he could still perform at the highest level 5 years after his Olympic peak.
But unfortunately, history repeated itself. His health issues came back, echoing the setbacks of '64. He missed the next season due to a recurring stomach ailment.
He returned in the fall of '74, but injuries and age had slowed him down. But by then, his ties to the U.S. ski industry were cemented, and his influence began shifting from competition to infrastructure.
This is a fascinating transition. In '75, he's hired to lead ski operations at Shawnee Mountain in Pennsylvania. This wasn't just a marketing contract. He was tasked with leadership and design.
And I love this observation from a journalist at the time. He recalled seeing Killy at Shawnee, and it was the perfect snapshot. He wrote that Killy would flash by at Shawnee, he was fast and smooth, and he stopped frequently to check the time on his Rolex. It's that perfect fusion of speed, flair, and high-stakes professionalism.
He also designed a challenging ski trail called Cup Run at the Snowshoe Resort in West Virginia, showing his continued technical influence.
And this transition leads us perfectly into the final and perhaps most impactful chapter of his professional life. Killy, the statesman and power broker, he moves from competing in sports to running them.
That is the ultimate character arc, isn't it? The link between the reckless dropout who hated being confined in a classroom and the disciplined administrator who oversaw massive global logistics.
The shift back to structured sports began early. From 1977 to 1994, he was on the executive board of the Alpine skiing committee of the FIS. That's 17 years of sustained high-level administrative commitment.
And his profile grew exponentially when he served as co-president of the organizing committee for the 1992 Winter Olympics in Albertville, France.
The Albertville Games were notoriously complex. They were spread across 13 different sites. Huge logistical challenges. Killy was instrumental in ensuring that operational success.
And what's fascinating is that he didn't limit his focus to skiing. In 1992, right after Albertville, he becomes the president of the Société du Tour de France. He held that role until 2001.
9 years overseeing one of the world's most massive annual sporting events. It required a level of diplomatic and political savvy that far outstripped just being a celebrity.
And he rose quickly through the ranks of the ultimate global sports body, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. He served as an IOC member from 1995 to 2014.
And this is where his influence truly solidified. He chaired the crucial coordination committee for 2 major Winter Olympics, Turin 2006 and Sochi 2014.
That role means you're responsible for overseeing the host city's preparations, ensuring they meet all obligations, arbitrating disputes. It's a huge, sustained commitment.
His career trajectory just shows that the initial volatility was channeled into competitive drive, and that drive matured into structured, effective leadership. The man who hated the classroom became one of the world's most powerful sports bureaucrats.
We have to touch on one more unusual athletic pursuit, though. It shows that need to push boundaries never faded. In addition to skiing and driving, Killy turned to distance running.
He competed in the 1983 New York City Marathon, and he finished in a very respectable 3 hours, 58 minutes, and 33 seconds. Again, it's that intrinsic need to test himself.
And his name is now permanently etched into the landscape of the French Alps. The massive ski area connecting Val d'Isère and Tignes was officially named L'Espace Killy in his honor.
He also received France's highest national recognition. He was made Grand Officer of the Légion d'honneur in 2000. This confirms his status not just as a sports hero, but as a deeply respected, influential figure in French public life.
So let's bring this deep dive to a close by looking at his personal life and drawing some final takeaways. There are a few fascinating personal connections.
He married the French actress Danielle Gaubert in 1973, a partnership that lasted until her death from cancer in 1987. They had a daughter, Emily, and their marriage bridged the worlds of sports celebrity and European cinema.
But the family connections are particularly unusual, reaching into international political drama. Killy adopted Gaubert's 2 children from her first marriage, and her first husband was Radamés Trujillo, the son of Rafael Trujillo, the assassinated dictator of the Dominican Republic.
Right. So Killy, the champion skier from the French Alps, was immediately connected by family to this high-level, post-dictatorial international drama right at the moment of his global ascension.
And his later life connections are also notable, showing his access to the highest global circles. Specifically, his friendship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Killy chaired the coordination committee for the Sochi 2014 Games, and the sources note he defended Putin publicly in 2015.
It's just a statement of fact from our sources that Killy moved in those circles, and it highlights his status as someone who maintains powerful relationships years after his official retirement.
And finally, a touch of classic American celebrity. The surprising fact that Killy was a favorite of the king of rock and roll. In the 1972 documentary Elvis on Tour, Elvis Presley actually named Jean-Claude Killy as his favorite skier.
Which just confirms that by the early 70s, Killy was truly a cultural icon, recognized by the biggest names in entertainment across continents.
So what does it all mean? The final takeaway is that his career is the blueprint for the modern athlete turned mogul. He went from a high-speed dropout struggling with injury to Olympic icon, and then with unprecedented speed converted that achievement into global commercial power and then into immense administrative influence.
He was the right man at the right time with the right management. His rise coincided perfectly with color television and global sports marketing firms like IMG. He became the face of his sport at the precise moment television changed everything.
Which brings us to a final thought, and this builds directly on that controversy we discussed around his downhill victory. Killy's 1968 downhill win hinged on just a few hundredths of a second, potentially gained by that subtle manipulation of the timing bar at the start. A tiny edge, but enough for gold.
And this raises a really important and I think a provocative question for you to consider. How might the massive subsequent commercial empire, the endorsements, the movies, the Tour de France presidency, the 2 decades of IOC roles, how might all of that have been radically altered if that gold medal had been a silver?
Wow.
That single marginal advantage gained on a split-second technicality. It highlights the paper-thin margin between becoming a timeless global legend and just being a great but historically less impactful athlete. That fraction of a second may have secured a 5-decade-long career.